Keanu Reeves arrived at a luxurious house in Beverly Hills for a scheduled visit. Dressed simply and casually, their altar upon seeing him couldn't hide. The disdain in her eyes to her he was, nothing more than someone out of place, wasting her precious time. But what happened during that visit would not only make her deeply regret her behavior, but also reveal a truth that would change everything. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The quiet hallways of the Beverly Hills real estate office exuded sophistication only the most exclusive clients were attended to. Here, indiscretion was one of the most valued qualities. In the manager's office, Keanu Reeves sat, dressed simply yet with the posture and calmness of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. He wore a subtle smile, but his eyes showed he was paying close attention to every detail of the conversation. The manager, a middle-aged man with a friendly demeanor, listened attentively as Keanu described what he was looking for in his next home. "I want something functional but with personality," Keanu said in his calm, direct tone, "a space that connects the indoors to nature. I need a place where I can both work and relax. It doesn't have to be ostentatious, but it must have quality in every detail." The manager nodded in agreement as he jotted down notes. He understood that Keanu valued a balance between simplicity and sophistication, a rare combination among the real estate office's clientele. Hoofton sought properties that screamed luxury and status. "I have a few options that might fit what you're looking for, Mr. Reeves," the manager said. "I can schedule a visit to a property that I believe would be perfect." Keanu nodded, but quickly added, "I have one important request. Don't mention my name to anyone. Let's keep the details between us." The manager looked momentarily puzzled, but Keanu continued, "When people know who I am, their behavior changes. They start fawning, acting differently. I don't want that. I want to be treated like anyone else with no privileges or special treatment. I also prefer to keep my privacy intact." The manager smiled, understanding Keanu's concern. He had dealt with other celebrities before, but few were as straightforward and unpretentious as him. "Understood, Mr. Reeves. I'll make sure your identity remains confidential. I'll only share the essentials with the agent conducting the showing." With that settled, Keanu scheduled the visit and left the office discreetly, drawing no attention. He trusted the manager to keep his promise. Few days later, Christine was waiting in front of the house chosen for the visit. The property was impressive, a modern masterpiece, with a glass facade, clean lines, and a meticulously landscaped garden. She had received instructions from the manager, but the form she'd been given was frustratingly vague. There was no name or identity provided for the client, just a generic description of someone who valued privacy and functionality. Must be another one of those paranoid businessmen obsessed with privacy, Christine thought as she adjusted her immaculate blazer. She was known for handling demanding clients, but she preferred those who arrived with open wallets and inflated egos, ready to impress. Then a modest car pulled into view. Christine froze for a moment, furrowing her brow. The vehicle was slightly dusty, a stark contrast to the supercars that usually parked in front of houses. Like this, when the car door opened, Christine almost let out a laugh of disbelief. A man stepped out calmly, wearing faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, and his relaxed demeanor seemed almost out of place in such a sophisticated setting. He walked with a calm, measured stride, completely at ease. Christine crossed her arms, eyeing him up and down. Her forced smile barely concealed her disdain. "Excuse me," she began, her tone sweet but laced with sarcasm. "Are you looking for something? This property isn't open to the public." The man looked at her calmly, seemingly unaffected by her attitude. "I'm here to see the house. I have a scheduled visit," he replied without introducing himself. Christine blinked, momentarily surprised, but quickly recovered her composure. She checked her tablet again and confirmed the scheduled visit. "All right, it seems you do have a visit scheduled," she said, her skepticism barely hidden. "Well, I'm Christine, the agent responsible for this property. Before we begin, I need to let you know that this is a top-tier home price to reflect its exclusivity. Are you sure this is what you're looking for? The man nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor. I'm sure the manager recommended this property. Based on what I asked for, Christine raised an eyebrows, still judging his appearance interesting. Well, let's get started, she said, shrugging as they headed toward the entrance. She murmured under her breath, just loud enough to be heard, I never underestimate someone's ability to look at something way out of their budget as they entered the house. Christine returned to her professional tone, but it was still tinged with arrogance. She gestured grandly as she showcased the spaces as though trying to impress him at all costs. This entryway was designed to make an immediate impact. It's the kind of space where you expect your guests to be struck, of course. That depends on the type of people you usually have over, she said, casting a quick glance at him, implying that perhaps he didn't have guests of such high caliber. The man walked calmly, examining the house's details without reacting to her provocations when they reached the living room. Christine continued. The floor-to-ceiling windows are made of high-quality tempered glass. It's the kind of feature sophisticated client value because it creates a seamless connection between indoor and outdoor spaces. He scanned the room but didn't express the admiration she was expecting. Instead, asked a technical question. Is the acoustic insulation? Effective glass can often be a weak point in that regard. Christine paused for a moment, clearly thrown off by the question. Of course it is, she quickly replied, trying to mask her irritation. This property wasn't designed for clients worried about technical issues. It's more for those who value luxury and design. When they reached the kitchen, she tried to regain control of the situation, pointing out the marble countertops. This Carrara marble is one of the most expensive on the market. It's perfect for those who want to impress during dinners or social events. Do you host many events? She asked, her tone more of a test than genuine curiosity. He walked over to the countertop, lightly running his fingers over the surface. It's beautiful, but Carrara marble is quite porous. What kind of treatment was applied to prevent stains? Christine took a deep breath. Frustrated, she hadn't expected such specific questions and felt like she was losing in control of the conversation. As I said, this is a high-end property. All materials were treated to ensure durability. I'm sure it won't be an issue for experienced owners, she replied, throwing in another passive-aggressive remark as they moved to the upper floor. Christine could no longer hide her impatience. She discreetly rolled her eyes every time he stopped to inspect a detail. When they reached the master suite, she opened the doors with dramatic flair, and here we have the master bedroom. It's the kind of space that truly represents what it means to live with class, she said, emphasizing the last words. Some of my clients love showing this room to their friends, but maybe that's not something you do, right? Ignored the comment, walking to the windows and observing the backyard with fruit trees and an infinity pool. Hess smiled slightly. This is exactly what I was looking for, a place connected to nature. Christine watched him with disbelief. She couldn't understand how he seemed so confident yet so simple. He has no idea what he's getting into. She'd hot, but what she didn't know was that she was standing before Keanu Reeves, who had chosen to keep his identity private to avoid the very kind of fawning Christine seemed so eager to provide to other more obvious clients. She had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. Christine adjusted her posture and tried to regain control of the situation as she began the property. To her forced smile and exaggerated gestures were painfully obvious as she attempted to impress the client, who in her mind had absolutely nothing to do with the environment they were in. Deep down, Christine had already decided that this visit was a waste of time, but her surface-level professionalism kept her playing the role. Well, I'll show you the property in detail, though. I'm sure the style of this house is meant for people with refined taste, she said, her voice laced with passive aggression that Keanu either didn't notice or simply chose to ignore upon entering the main living area. Christie made a point of highlighting the most expensive design elements, speaking with an enthusiasm so forced that it was almost uncomfortable. This space was designed to create a visual impact. It's the kind of living room that turns any casual gathering into a magazine-worthy event. Of course, it depends on how you use the space, but I imagine that's not really something you do often, is it? Christine gave Keanu a brief glance, expecting some kind of reaction. He, however, simply observed the space calmly. He walked to the window, slightly ran his hand along the metal frame, and asked a straightforward question. Are these windows resistant to extreme weather conditions? With so much glass that could be a concern, Christine froze for a moment, clearly irritated that he hadn't reacted to her early comment. She took a deep breath and replied, still trying to maintain a professional tone. Well, this property was designed for clients who don't exactly worry about those kinds of details. She paused, flashing a condescending smile. People who buy homes like this are usually more focused on aesthetics than practical concerns. Keanu simply nodded, refusing to engage in her attempt to undermine him. His composure remained unshaken. Fair enough. I understand, he replied, turning back. To take in the space again, Christine led him to the kitchen, her growing impatience thinly veiled. The kitchen was a true masterpiece of contemporary design, featuring Italian marble countertops, custom cabinetry, and state-of-the-art integrated appliances. She spread her arms as if she were unveiling a stage, clearly convinced that this was the space that would finally impress the client. This is a dream kitchen for renowned chefs. The countertops are made of Ka marble, and the cabinetry is imported directly from Europe. It's the kind of space that makes anyone want to host important guests to show off what they have. Keanu slowly walked over to the countertop, lightly running his fingers across its surface. He asked in a calm, serene tone, "It's beautiful, but how about functionality, though? The cabinets have a soft close system. It seems like a small detail, but it makes a big difference in daily use." Keanu walked slowly around the room, stopping beside the king-size bed and looking up at the ceiling. He seemed to be evaluating everything in a very practical way, which only made Christine more uneasy. "The lighting here is interesting," he said, pointing to the ceiling. "It looks like the design prioritizes natural light. But what about at night? Is the lighting system adjustable?" Christine sighed, clearly frustrated. "Yes, of course, the lighting system is automated. That's something that comes standard in properties at this level." She paused and added another sharp comment. "It's the kind of things sophisticated clients don't even need to ask about. They just understand." Keanu looked at her with an enigmatic smile. He didn't respond, but it was clear he was nodding every word, every gesture, and every look Christine threw his way. Heck, knew he was being judged, but he seemed almost amused by it. Finally, Christine, now visibly impatient, led him to the backyard. The infinity pool shimmered under the sun, and the landscaping created an oasis of tranquility and beauty. This is the perfect space for social events or simply relaxing after a long day. Of course, that depends on the lifestyle of the owner, Christine said. Emphasizing the last words, Keanu observed the garden with a serene smile. "This is exactly what I was looking for. A space connected to nature that makes all the difference." Christine almost laughed. Connected to nature?" she said with a sarcastic tone. "Well, for those who value that, perhaps it's ideal. Although for some clients, the focus is more on impressing others than on relaxing." Keanu turned to her, still wearing the same calm expression. "Sometimes, it's better to impress people with who we are rather than what we have." Christine didn't know how to respond. For the first time, she felt uncomfortable with the situation, though she still couldn't quite understand why. She had no idea she was treating Keanu Reeves, one of the most admired figures in Hollywood, though he were insignificant, but she was about to find out, and the lesson would be unforgettable. Christine lead Keanu through the house, but her patience was wearing thin. She tried to hide her discomfort with forced smiles and passive-aggressive remarks, but deep down she had already formed a definitive opinion of him. To Christine, this casually dressed man with his calm demeanor was far below the level of the property she was presenting. With every question Keanu asked, Christine's disdain became more evident. She discreetly rolled her eyes side between explanations and occasionally stole quick glances at her watch, hoping the tour would end soon. While they were in the living room, Keanu crouched down to examine the baseboards near the windows. The finish here is interesting. It looks like they use natural wood. Is it resistant to moisture? He asked in a calm, genuinely interested tone. Christine crossed her arms and responded impatiently. Yes, of course, everything in this house is of the highest quality. I don't think you need to worry about small details like that. Keanu simply nodded as though he hadn't noticed her condescending tone. He continued to explore the space, analyzing corners and discreetly testing the functionality of switches and doors. Meanwhile, Christine watched with a mix of irritation and frustration. Woosk's questions like that. He's acting like some kind of expert, but he clearly doesn't belong here. He's probably not even going to buy anything. The manager must have been joking when he scheduled this visit, she thought when they reached the second floor. Christine decided to pick up the pace of the tour, clearly tired of what she deemed a waste of time. She opened the doors to one of the guest bedrooms, gesturing briskly toward the space. This is one of the guest rooms. It's quite spacious, as you can see, but of course I doubt it matters much if the owner doesn't usually have guests. The sarcasm in her voice was evident. Keanu walked over to the bedroom window, opened it slightly, and commented, "Good ventilation. That's important. Well ventilated spaces are less likely to develop moisture issues on the walls." Christine let out a short, derisive laugh, shaking her head. Well, this house wasn't exactly designed for such practical concerns. It's more suited for those who appreciate aesthetics and the lifestyle it offers. Keanu looked at Christine for a brief moment, as though evaluating her words, but he didn't respond. He knew she was trying to dismiss him, but his calm demeanor remained unshaken. When they reached the second-floor terrace, Christine made a point of highlighting the panoramic view. Here we have a view that's simply unmatched. It's the kind of feature that sophisticated clients truly value. You can imagine hosting an incredible parties here or enjoying relaxing evenings with important friends, don't you think? She asked, throwing him a provocative glance. Keanu leaned on the railing and looked at the horizon for a few seconds before responding. It's a beautiful view, yes, but for me the most important thing is whether the environment is comfortable and functional for daily life. Christine almost let out a frustrated sigh. She was tired of hearing what she considered simplistic comments from this man. She decided to be more direct, hoping to end the tour as quickly as possible. Look, I'll be honest. Normally, clients who are truly interested in properties at this level come prepared to close a deal. I'm not sure about your experience with homes like this, but this property is designed for those who understand and value exclusivity. Are you sure you're in the right place? She said with a cold smile that barely concealed her hostility. Keanu turned to her slowly, with the same serene expression as always. Always, I'm sure, but it's always good to make sure the investment is truly worth it, he replied with slight emphasis on the word investment that made Christine feel uneasy. When they finally returned to the ground floor, Christine let out a small sigh of relief. She was convinced that he wasn't a serious buyer and had already begun formulating how she would report to the manager that the client was just a curious time waster. But then Keanu did something that caught her completely off guard. "I'd like to see the contract and speak with the manager before making any decisions," he said calmly. Christine froze for a moment. "Contract? He's serious," she thought, forcing a smile. She replied, Of course, I'll call the manager so we can discuss the details, but he should let you know that this is a top-tier property and the negotiation requires a strong commitment. I hope you're aware of that." Keanu simply nodded, while Christine, now visibly uncomfortable, picked up her phone to call the manager. His demeanor was beginning to make her uneasy, but she still had no idea what was about to happen when the manager arrived. His expression immediately changed upon seeing Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, what a pleasure to see you again. I hope the property is meeting your expectations," he said warmly, his tone full of respect. Christine's eyes widened in shock. "Reeves," she looked at Keanu in disbelief, realizing at that moment that she had made a monumental mistake. She hadn't just treated a casual man poorly. She had treated one of Hollywood's most admired figures condescendingly throughout the entire visit. I didn't know, Christine stammered, her voice trembling as she tried to justify her behavior. Keanu, however, interrupted her with a calm smile. You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. Silence filled the room as the manager shot Christine a reproachful look. The other staff members who had started to notice what was unfolding watched from a distance, exchanging awkward glances. Keanu turned to the manager. Before we discuss any contract, I'd like to talk about how we can ensure future clients are treated fairly, no matter who they are. Christine felt her face flush. She realized she had lost much more than the chance to sell a property. She had lost her credibility, and at that moment she understood she was facing a lesson she would never forget. Inside the luxurious house, the atmosphere had changed drastically after the revelation that the casually dressed man was none other than Keanu Reeves. The room was filled with tension. Christine felt as though the air around her had grown heavy. Her heart was racing, and the silence between those present in the room was deafening. While Keanu calmly spoke with the real estate manager, Christine stood frozen in a corner, completely still. The house, once a symbol of power and sophistication, for now seemed like a stage where her incompetence and arrogance had been laid bare. Other members of the real estate team who were present, including 2 interns and a photographer documenting the property for the listing, began to notice what was happening. Curious and, in some cases, reproachful glances were directed toward Christine at the center of the room. Keanu and the manager spoke in hushed tones, but it was impossible for the others present not to sense the weight of the conversation. Keanu's calm and polite demeanor contrasted sharply with the visible anxiety of the manager, who was sweating lightly as he listened to the client. The house is truly impressive, Keanu began with a slight smile. It's exactly what I've been looking for, but before we proceed with the contract, I'd like to discuss something important. The manager swallowed hard and quickly replied, Of course, Mr. Reeves. We're happy to adjust any details necessary. Keanu cast a brief glance in Christine's direction. She immediately averted her gaze, pretending to check something on her tablet. My concern isn't with the house. Keanu continued, it's with the way people are treated here. I requested discretion because I wanted to be treated like anyone else, and today I got a very clear idea of how things operate when someone appears to be out of place. The manager blushed with shame. He knew exactly what Keanu was referring to. I understand, Mr. Reeves, and I deeply regret any negative experience you've had. I can assure you that this does not reflect the values of our team, the manager said, shooting a reproachful look at Christine, who pretended not to notice, feeling that she was the target of the criticism. Christine, finally, broke the silence. Her voice was hesitant, but she tried to sound confident. Mr. Reeves, I apologize if I made you feel disrespected. I truly didn't know who you were. If I had known, I would never have. She hesitated, realizing she was about to say something that would make things worse. Keanu raised his hand, gently interrupting her. You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect, he said firmly, yet with a kind tone. My appearance, the car I drive, the clothes I wear, none of that should determine the value you place on someone. Christine felt her face grow hot. She knew Keanu was absolutely right, and no excuse could undo what had happened. She looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. The others present in the house exchanged uneasy glances. Mark and Susan, 2 of the interns, whispered to each other in the corner, while the photographer, who had been adjusting his camera to take shots of the backyard, paused to observe the scene. This is going to ruin her reputation, Mark murmured. Susan shook her head. Maybe she needs this to learn. Christine has always treated people as if they were beneath her. Now she's paying the price. Meanwhile, the manager was trying to regain control of the situation. Mr. Reeves, I can assure you that we'll take steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Christine is an experienced professional, and she will learn from this, he said, attempting to diffuse the situation. Keanu, however, turned his attention directly to Christine. I hope so, because respect isn't a matter of experience or position. It's something basic, and it should be non-negotiable. Christine felt his thought. The ground was opening up beneath her. Feet she knew her reputation was on the line. But more than that, she felt the weight of the lesson she was learning. Keanu walked over to the large window, overlooking the backyard, and gazed at the infinity pool. He stood silently for a few moments, admiring the view. Finally, he turned to the manager and said, "The house is beautiful. I think I'll move forward with the purchase. But I hope this experience serves as an opportunity for reflection, not just for Christine, but for everyone." The manager nodded, relieved that Keanu was still willing to proceed with the deal. He knew that Thestar could have easily walked away and publicly exposed what had happened. Keanu then headed toward the door. "I'll wait in the car while you prepare the final documents. Let me know when they're ready." And with that, he left, leaving behind an atmosphere still thick with tension. Christine remained silent, her mind racing with thoughts of regret and shame. She knew she would never forget that day and the lesson it had brought. The sound of Keanu's footsteps faded as he exited through the front door, leaving behind a room steeped in awkward silence. Christine stood frozen in place, her face pale and her eyes fixed on the floor. Her thoughts were chaotic. How did this happen? How didn't I realize? What are people going to say about this? The manager, on the other hand, tried to maintain his composure, though his expression betrayed his discomfort. He knew that despite Keanu's kindness, this incident wouldn't be easily forgotten, and that the responsibility for Christine's behavior fell squarely on his shoulders. A short while later, the sound of Keanu's car engine starting and then shutting off again brought everyone back to reality. He hadn't left. He was simply waiting patiently while the manager finalized the paperwork. Realizing this, Christine felt a mix of relief and tension. He still wanted to go through with the deal, which meant the situation wasn't entirely lost. However, she also knew she'd have to face him again. The manager hurriedly reviewed the documents, his hands trembling slightly as he filled out the final details. He was determined not to let any further mistakes happen that day. Christine, meanwhile, walked to the kitchen counter where a glass of water had been left. She picked it up and took a sip, hoping the cold drink would calm her nerves. But shame was an unrelenting wave, and the water offered little solace. "Christine, I need to speak with you," the manager said in a serious tone, gesturing for her to follow him to a corner of the room. His tone was firm, but measured, likely to avoid adding further embarrassment in front of the other staff. Christine swallowed hard and followed him, feeling the stares of the other agents and interns on her back. Once they were at a safe distance, the manager crossed his arm and looked at her directly. "I don't even know where to start. That was unacceptable," he said bluntly. "I trusted you with one of the most important clients we've ever had, and you..." He paused, choosing his word carefully. "You completely threw it away with your behavior. I didn't know who he was." Christine protested, her voice low, but full of desperation. "If I had known." "That's exactly the problem," the manager interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "You didn't need to know who he was. What you did today wasn't just unprofessional, it was a lack of respect for a client who came here to be treated like anyone else." Christine remained silent. She knew she had no excuse, but hearing it spoken out loud by her boss made the shame even harder to bear. "You're one of the most experienced agents here, Christine," the manager continued, "and today you showed the exact opposite. I hope you learn from this, because this is your last chance." Christine felt a lump in her throat but nodded silently. She knew she had no choice. A few minutes later, Keanu was called back into the room to sign the papers. He entered with the same calm demeanor as before, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The manager handed him the documents quickly, explaining the details as Keanu reviewed them. Christine remained in the background, watching silently. She desperately wanted to apologize again, but she knew that any words might make things worse. She simply hoped her presence would go unnoticed. Keanu signed the papers, and before handing over the final page to the manager, looked directly at Christine for a moment. Her heart seemed to stop. He walked over to her, holding the contract in one hand. "Christine," he began, his voice calm but firm. "It's not easy to admit our mistakes, but it's the only way to grow. I hope you take something Positive away from today, Christine opened her mouth to respond, but then closed again. She simply nodded, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. Keanu handed the contract to the manager, offered a small warm smile, and then walked out once again. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.